Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to DojoLIVE. Today is Thursday, April 8th, 2021. I'm Tulio Siragusa, broadcasting from Southern California. I'm joined today by Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico. Hi, Kim. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Tulio. Thank you.
Last show of the week. And Carlos Ponce in Cuernavaca, Mexico.
Thank you.
Last but not least, and also want to welcome our guest today, Bruce Lichorowic, who is the president and CEO of Galen Robotics. Hi, Bruce. Welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Glad to be here.
Today, we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic. I mean, everybody's enamored with robotics, but imagine robotics who can perform surgery. I mean, talk about next level of robotics. But before we go into the topic and dig in a little bit more and learn more, let's get to know Bruce a bit. Bruce, if you could please introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Bruce Lichorowic. I am a serial entrepreneur, and this is my fourth startup. And so, but I am a hybrid. I spent half my career in high tech, and I crossed over to medical about 10 years ago. And in that crossing over, we brought and bring a lot of experiences that we learned in high tech into the medical world. My background specifically was more of software as a service. And so we went through the 90s and the 2000s where, the actual hardware became more and more in the cloud, and services on demand and subscriptions became more of a thing. And so we are in a position here at Galen to introduce a product or a robot to the industry under the guise of a service. And so that's really one of the things that we're doing. So my background with my partner is very unique. And so we are one of the few types that are in medical world today that has a full-blown high-tech background. And we just moved here to Baltimore from Silicon Valley. So I spent 30 years in Silicon Valley with all my other startups and things like that. So that's where we are today.
Cool. Yeah, we've had guests that have come from either the medical field or otherwise who've gone into tech and have had to go through the learning curve of what it's like to be in this space. So it's nice to also see those in tech who are tackling on an initiative that's much needed. Tell us a little bit about Galen Robotics. What gave birth to this idea? What is the company's mission? I know you're surgical robotics as a service, but can you tell us a little bit more what that means?
Sure. History. The prior company we did was a surgical robot, and when we finished with that project, Johns Hopkins gave us a ring around 2016 and asked if we'd be interested in commercializing their latest invention coming out of their robotics lab here at the Homewood campus. And him and hawed a little bit until we found out who the inventor was. The inventor is Russ Taylor, who is really one of the godfathers or the great uncle of robotics. His DNA is in every robot that's out there, whether it's a Da Vinci or Mako. So all the surgical robots, he has some of his IP in that. And so this was a invention that he had started in 2010 with a bunch of PhDs and brought it to the prototype stage and now to the commercial stage. And so Hopkins asked us if we'd be interested with my team to come over and take that to market. So for the past 4 years, we've been going through the steps for FDA, we're not approved yet, but getting ready for FDA of prototypes and things like that. And so the robot is actually very simple. I wish I had a picture to show you, but it's basically a single arm bandit, I call it, where it can hold any tool the surgeon chooses to use at that moment in time. Meaning, if I choose to use this back scratcher, you would hook it up to the robot. And the robot
yes, please.
would give, and as you move, the robot moves and gives stability and navigation to it. So it's really a simple idea, but it's a very delicate one because we're focusing on the head and neck and the brain. We're focusing on head and neck surgery. And so that whole idea came to fruition. And so we're at the point now of taking this to market, or thinking about, as soon as we get our FDA approval, we'll take it to market. But we wanted to take it to market in a different way. And the whole idea of bringing it to market was not to have the hospitals purchase it. We would bring it to them as a service. So we would place the robot in their hospitals, and then there'd be usage fee. It's just like cable TV.
Right.
You bring the cable TV in, it's $40 a month. Now you want HBO. Now you want Showtime. Now you want on demand. Those usage fees go up, depending on the case that the surgeon would be using it for. So it gives the hospitals a flexibility in pricing, and also keeps their capital expenditures down, especially with COVID. I mean, you've got $120 billion being lost this year in the U.S. of revenue in hospitals. So these buyers, these admins at these hospitals are going to be beating everybody up for better pricing, better terms. And so the big guys are going to get in there first. But when you're a startup, you got to be unique. And so we want to bring this digital surgery as a service. Will be our launch. That's how we're launching the company.
Great, sounds fantastic. There's so much to unravel here. I'm looking forward to it. We have so many. I mean, there's all these costs of getting started, hurdles that are being removed for hospitals, which should improve the care for so many people. But before we do that, let's introduce the topic. Let's go right into it. Kim, please kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Bruce, and it's a pleasure to have you on our show. So the topic for today is, what if reimagining surgical robots could save lives and revolutionize healthcare access? So, and you already touched on this very well, Bruce, with digital surgery as a service. And we already talked about some of those benefits, accessibility, cost. My question for you, I would like to first unpack what reimagining means. Now, I fortunately have not had to experience too many surgeries in my life. I think the one that might come closest to this was when I needed to have my appendix removed. And thankfully, I got to have a more modern surgery where I didn't have to have that big, long, ugly scar, but it was 3 small incisions, if I recall correctly. One was for a tube that would sort of inflate my abdomen. Another was for the camera, so the surgeon could see what he was doing. And then the third was for the operational tools, of course. So what's next? What type of robotics? What does reimagining mean?
Right now, intuitive surgery has broke all the ice for digital surgery. I mean, you're looking at the Da Vinci. It's been out now for 21 years. It's the surgery. It's a robot of choice now for a lot of the surgeries that are being done. What you're going to see now are more specialized robots, that can't do some of the things the Da Vinci can do. I mean, you're not going to use a Da Vinci on your brain where you got where you have 3 holes in your head. Okay, they usually just go in through one port and do their operation. But at the same time, you're going to see robots are going to be a lot less capital intense, a lot less as expensive. And you're going to see it to this risk sharing model where a lot of the medical device manufacturers are going to have to share the risk with these hospitals. So the next generation of robots you're going to see, they're going to be highly specialized, high precision, and they're going to be ones that will be rolled in, used for 5 minutes, or used for 5 hours and rolled out. So it's going to be that kind of flexibility you're going to see versus, they take up the whole room. And so a lot of that's coming down the pipe, and it's just evolution. So that's how we see it.
Bruce, I have a question. I can very easily understand how Succeed would sound for maybe from the tech perspective or from the business perspective, even from the medical and hospital perspective. Everything that has to do with medical robotics or surgical robotics. But what I cannot avoid, I cannot help but think also from the actual person under being treated. So let's say, for example, if I knew that I was going to be put under the knife, as I was saying off the air, like by a robot, I might feel kind of a little bit, weird or strange to say the least, right?
Apprehensive?
So yeah, apprehensive. It's like, oh, what do you mean a machine is going to cut me in half or something? How do you deal with this situations? If you do, I mean, how do you deal with these situations when it comes to the adoption of the technology of everything that you're doing?
Okay. Everybody's afraid of the bad robot that goes crazy, right? And so we're not there yet. So you're going to deal with robotics. The surgeon's always in control, and it's more of an assist. But what if you look at the population today and the surgery that you just went through for your appendix, if you ask the people, would you prefer to have your surgery with robotic assist, or would you not? It's like 70 to 80% are going to say, I want the robot to assist the surgeon, because
the robot doesn't have shaky hands.
Well, it doesn't shake or whatever. So we as
not get hangovers.
Exactly.
So we as a generation have accepted surgical robotics. But one thing that I want to come back to is the cost of these robots are not cheap. I mean, you're talking Da Vinci is $2.5 million. You're talking some of the robots from Medtronic or Stryker. They're $1 million, 800,000. So these are big ticket items. And so what as a service means, we put our robots in there at no charge, but there's also a usage fee and things like that, and so many cases a year, and you get to keep the robot. So that's how the difference works. Anyway, that's what I wanted to get to, is you're dealing with some really big capital expenses on this.
Okay, so the hurdle to buy a piece of equipment like that for a smaller hospital or less affluent marketplaces is a non-starter. Let's call it a non-starter, right? I mean, so what happens is the care in those markets is not as good as those who could afford that kind of equipment. So is this, in essence, democratizing care across a broader spectrum, giving access to more people to the kind of care that would otherwise only be exclusive to those who can afford it?
That's a really, really good question. It's not there's a couple of answers to that question. One, in these smaller markets, if the hospital doesn't have a robot, one, he's not going to get the surgeons coming out of these teaching hospitals. I mean, these surgeons, these residents who are graduating, or these surgeons that are graduating, they're robot ready. They're trained on robots already. So they're looking for robots coming out of graduation. So going to a secondary market that doesn't have a Da Vinci, doesn't have a Mako, doesn't have any of these robots in place, you're not going to get the surgeons that are coming from a lot of the top universities in the country and in the world. Number one. Number two is you're not going to get the patients. Patients are going to want robotic surgery. So they're going to ask their doc, are you going to use a robot or not? And if he's going to say, I don't have one, then they're going to go to another hospital. So what we are trying to do, sure, all the teaching hospitals, all the universities, they can afford to buy our stuff, or they can afford to buy these robots. It's the secondary markets that you're referring to. The local community hospitals that can't dish out $2.5 million or $1 million. And that's one of the markets that we want to get to get our robot into, because we think a lot of surgeries are done in those local hospitals, community hospitals. And that's where the volume is, and that's where I think the care, we can assist in that care. That's what we're targeting.
Are these cost savings therefore going to be able to trickle down to the patient themselves? So we're talking about the business and the hospitals and access to the equipment, but therefore if the equipment costs go down, the assumption is surgery costs would go down. Am I on the right track or on the wrong track with that question?
You're right, but every surgery comes with reimbursement. And so the hospital makes X amount per surgery. And so we're trying to at least get into trying to get under that line of costs, so that it's not added cost to the hospital. Passing it down to the patient, that's coming in the future. I think right now hospitals are just trying to deal with the whole volume of elective surgery, because this is mostly elective surgery now. This is where the majority of the hospital does make their profits. But you're gonna, eventually, I think as costs come down, that should pass on to the customer. It should. If it doesn't, who knows?
Is it only elective surgery today because of the costs, or demand, or both? Like, where's the applicability for this beyond elective surgery? I mean, could this be deployed at a theater, for example, in a conflict situation for soldiers? Can this be applied in where there's been a massive hurricane or accident or what have you? I mean, where's the applicability beyond elective surgery for this kind of technology? Well, eliminating the hurdle of the big cost up front opens the door to a lot of opportunities, I would think. Where do you think is the next opportunity?
Well, you bring up another good point. Mobilization of robotics is something. Field hospitals. Are you going to work on someone's ear or throat or head or eye in a field hospital? Maybe. Most likely, these hospitals stabilize and transport to the bigger hospitals. But you're going to see you're going to see these things evolve. We also have another Galen that we work on with the Hopkins, and we call it the baby Galen. It's an eye robot. It's about this big. Sits on the desk or sits on the table and helps surgeons with doing eye surgery. Extremely high precision, extremely high tolerance. It's in development, but it's one of those things where you're going to see that be portable and possibly moved maybe into the field. Right now, our first obviously is the teaching hospitals, secondary hospitals, but we think DoD, the Department of Defense, these are type of things that can definitely be looked at for field use at some point in time in the future.
Amazing. Carlos, you're on mute.
I'm never on mute. That was on purpose. That was intentionally on purpose. Remember, I'm Carlos, the mute guy here.
I don't believe you are Carlos, the mute guy, but I do not believe that was on purpose.
I cannot wait for the reel that Beo's going to create with all the moments where you do that. It's going to be like a 3-hour.
For the record, I'm famous for that. I put myself on mute and I forget to unmute myself, and I'm always, making a fool of myself, which I don't mind. I mean, that's pretty much a standard here. Bruce, I have a question, and I'm curious again from the layman's perspective, and the way I understand robotics in general is that robotics work and function and respond based on data, right? It's based on input, parameters that are set by somebody else at some point. Now, how does this work when it comes to such a let's call it a sensitive matter, such as the medical profession? So you have all these wonderful doctors that have spent like decades, maybe sometimes at the faculty or whatever. And then how do you integrate both aspects as regarding data that is used, or how does this work?
Well, robots right now are used in assist physician. They assist the surgeon. So the surgeon is in control all the time.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So very few robots, if one I know of, where they set the parameter, they set it in place, hit go, they go have a coffee, come back, it's done. I mean, that's for like a particular knee surgery or whatever, and that's an autonomous one. But they're rare. The surgeons want to stay in control. Plus, it takes time to set these things up, and in a lot of cases, these operations aren't that long. But you're going to see these things be used in a number of ways that, like for where we're targeting, like for brain surgery, the surgeons want to stay right there. They want to stay in control. They're not going to be remote, in a remote setting. They're going to be right at the patient. So, it's an interesting question, one that's going to evolve. But the data, as you mentioned, there's a lot of collection of data, and so we'll collect that data and movements and use that data for training. So let's say a surgeon wants to know how to do cochlear ear replacement or something, and so we can pull that data and show him 10 of the best ways to do it, with the robot. But you bring up one good thing. Surgeons are surgeons, and there's freshly graduated ones, and you got the guys that are in their 50s and 60s. And as you get older, you're going to start to have, and surgeons don't like to talk about it, but you're going to have tremor. We all are going to start to shake at some point in time. What was interesting about robotics is a lot of the older surgeons will say to us, well, I'm good, I'm not going to need anything. They'll come and say, maybe I can get another 5 years or 3 more years extension out of my career if this thing can help me. And the young guys coming out want to look at robotics saying, maybe the robot will make me as good as the 20-year doc. So you have this bell curve. You have this bell curve of really gifted surgeons, 1 or 2% that don't need a robot. They got hands from God. And you got the guys over here that are more skilled, but need some assistance and maybe because they're younger and they'll have the techniques down. So we try to flatten that curve and bring everybody to the center. Get these guys more like the gifted guys, and give the gifted guys maybe another couple more years of surgery with assistance. And so you're seeing across the board an acceptance by the docs for robotic surgery versus, no, I don't want shit. I got my tricks. I got my skill. I don't need any, I'm good. We don't see that at all. Not at all. They are open to anything that makes them better, more safe, less fatigued. I mean, sometimes they're holding an endoscope for 5 hours while someone's doing a surgery, where if the robot can hold that for them, that's a big deal, right?
Wow.
So you have that scenario going down in the general category of surgical robotics, and it's across the board. It's everybody.
Right. So in a way, you can call surgical robotics as a way to what I would freely or loosely call an equalizer or an enhancing equalizer for both sides of the spectrum of the medical profession. The young generations and the older generations. So is my assumption correct?
Yeah. No, the young guys, they want to be as good, but they want speed. They want to get okay. The older guys, they know how to do it. They've got the speed. They just want to maybe have a longer extension to their career.
Right. I see.
And you've got this curve. It's really unique. And it took me a while to realize it in talking to our surgeons of who's who.
Right.
And you got these chief of staffs that are in their 50s and 60s. They're going, yeah, bring it in. Let's take a look.
Right. Kim, I
Thank
think you
you.
have
Thank you,
another
Bruce.
question before we wrap up.
I do. Thank you, Tulio. So, Bruce, if I remember correctly here at the beginning of our show, Tulio mentioned how we've had other guests who've kind of gone from the medical field into the tech field. You're kind of the reverse of that, I think, from what I understand, stepping out of the tech field into the medical element. What was it that pushed you personally to make that move?
Because every software product I have ever done is either been revved out or outdated. So when you look at my legacy in software, if you're not in it all the time, upgrading, you kind of, things evolve really quick. I wanted to have more of something that I could do for mankind that could be a legacy. At the same time, move into the medical world. I always wanted to move into that. So if you're going to be in software, if you're going to be in high tech, the first area to move into would be robotics. And why? Because 80% of a robot is run by software. The other 20 is hardware. It's nuts and bolts. So software runs the robot. So it was an easy, whether it was a computer, same thing. 20% of the hardware, it's 80% software. So when you look at it, it was an easy transition. Of course, I had help. I had mentors, giving me encouragement because I was scared to death. I was like, because, but the FDA actually helped us because we have to now follow set rules. Where in software, once it's done, get it out, and we'll rev our way, we'll fix our way. Microsoft taught us that, right? Get it out. If we got failure, we'll do an upgrade.
They're still teaching us that.
Let's not even go there.
Really. So, but with the FDA, it's got to be right, and you got to be able to show it's right, and you got to keep that for safety and efficacy. And that gave us a little bit of assurance that we just can push this stuff out. So it was a little bit of a learning curve, but it wasn't that steep. I think going the other way would be tough.
Bruce, I had before we wrap, I had one other question. I know the cost of insurance for surgeons is extraordinarily high. I mean, it's astronomical. Actually, my very first job, like 32 years ago, was in a physician reciprocal insurance company. And I mean, $500,000 plus policies for surgeons to be able to do surgery once a week or twice a week. And God forbid they've had any kind of complication, it gets even costlier. Does this help reduce that cost because now you're eliminating some margin of error by using something that's a lot more precise, less of a risk of, the shaky hand or what have you that could cause a problem when you're working in like the brain? I mean, you have to be very precise with that. Have you seen any discounts, if you will, from insurance companies for using robotics more in surgery?
I haven't seen it. I think the risks are always there,
Right.
Whether a robot's with you or not. So I don't see. Now maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see the insurance companies giving these guys a break. Whether they're using robotic surgery, maybe over a period of time, where now he's or she's registered 5,000 surgeries and using the Da Vinci and everything's fine and good outcomes. Right. Maybe that he gets a break. They get a break.
Right.
But I don't know. I think that's even with some of the surgeries that one of the surgeons here that want to do into the uterus. They want to do during a 26-week fetus. They are using, not the robot at this time, but they have perfected a surgery to fix the spinal area for spinal bifida, where they put in a couple of sutures in the back of the baby's neck to close that up. You're talking incredible risk. I mean, of a spontaneous birth. The whole uterus is brought out of the body. The room is 88 degrees. It's a mind-boggling surgery. At the same time, it has a high percentage of success. But that's a skill that only gifted surgeons are able to do. So we're hoping that we'll be able to have our robot help more surgeons do those kind of surgeries and make a big difference. So that's way in the future. That's
Right.
way in the future. For right now, it's just we're going to focus here, and we'll probably move to other areas of the body of the robot. But it's fun times. I
Yeah,
mean,
so much potential, right? I think of like that movie Fifth Element, where they reconstruct that whole person from this chamber. That's what I think of eventual potential for robotics, with combined with I don't know, nanotechnology and those kinds of things. Carlos, we're up on time. I know you got one more question, Bruce. You got one more? Or?
No, I'm done. Actually,
Okay.
yes, actually, I really appreciate Bruce having responded to mine very satisfactorily.
Thanks for being with us, Bruce. We enjoyed having you. Love hearing about these disruptive business models that make it more accessible for more people to have access to care in the marketplace. Thanks for being with us. Everyone, come back on Monday at 12 noon Pacific for the recap show. We're going to
recap show
this week's shows, and we will provide the lineup for next week, unless you have time for that right now. Carlos, what do we got coming up next week?
Well, we have a full week, Tulio. We have
Nice.
John Vitti from Versus Game. We have Chad Burgraff from Dispoteca, and then we have Tyler Birch and Rene Garcia from Samaritan. So all the info about the shows and the topics are going to be right there on the website. So go there, check it out. But they're all going to be at 12 noon Pacific, as ever. And, of course, you cannot miss the recap show on Monday.
Thanks for being with us. Stay safe, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you, Bruce.